We go shopping thinking about what we need rather than what we want. And I'm just wondering, if any of us have any ideas about how our personal choices, what we buy, how we buy, how we live, our lifestyle, how that impacts the rest of the world, and either contributes to the relief of poverty or contributes to the deepening of other people's poverty. I think that maybe these are things that they're thinking about. So, anybody would like to respond to that? Either from the audience or one of our panelists.
As I stayed in the United States here 22 years, as a foreigner who came to this country, I see two extremes. One is this country is the most strong country in the world, but they go too strong, extremely to the side. One is wasted material. We are the world's most wasted material country. So this need to do is how we can educate our friend, our family member, and involve into the society to make a little bit change, more practically save the material. The second one is we still have a lot of poor. So if you go to buffet, you see how they eat, even though they are poor. This is not something we can feed them. The greedy cannot be fed. So this is something that I'm more concerned when I come to New York and then I come to the Midwest. I see the difference. So in the city, we have a lot of good people who want to help. But I am helping them too in education. Not much in material, because that is not something I can do much. When I come to the subway station with them, the homeless stay beside me. When you see that from my temple, 231st Street, come to Manhattan, I saw them, one half chicken, they finished the half chicken on the way, the homeless. It just, too much calorie, too much fat come to the body, and the whole jar of the soft drink, the finish it. So something that we need to involve with the society to make change. These two extremes. So everybody we have responsible. Yeah. If you are good heart, please concern whatever you can see, please help to give advice or help to give them a hand to make change.
When we were planning this panel discussion, we were hoping to have somebody on from either a master gardener or someone from the community gardens movement. I think it's fair to call it a movement. It's certainly something that I think we've all noticed has caught on in the urban areas in St. Louis, and just next door to my apartment building in the city, there's a fabulous community garden. I was trying to track down the man who started it, and he seems to have disappeared. But certainly the garden is very beautiful, very productive, and is tended by people in the neighborhood who really need that food to supplement their diets. So I think we were thinking that that's perhaps an area, and Cameron, you're a great gardener, and you're interested in this. And I know that Mava has a garden every summer, and there's often extra produce, and I was wondering, if maybe we can channel some of that food towards one of these.
I know you said that farmers would donate produce to the food pantry. So I'm wondering if there's any legalities that would prevent small-time growers from donating to the pantry?
No, we do take, if like, let's say you have an extra box of tomatoes from your garden, we would accept that. We don't necessarily, if it's a large amount, we'll come pick it up. But if it's one box, we might have to have you bring it to us in Bridgeton. That's the only thing. But there's something called the Good Samaritan law that protects folks who donate and are acting in good faith. That's how we're protected as well, by giving out food. If someone were to become sick, that law protects you. As far as the community garden, there's actually a family I wrote a story about. They're from Chester, Illinois. Well, they're from, I don't even know where. But one night, the husband and wife and their 3 children rolled into Chester and they were on fumes and completely were out of gas. So they found a church parking lot and stayed there. They had everything they owned in their car. The people of Chester, which is a small rural town way south, kind of rallied together. The local food pantry that we partner with gave them food, helped them find an apartment and that sort of thing. And for this family, it was the Hunt family, the dad had a lot of experience gardening. So he went around to this rural town and asked some of the local farmers if he could have a half acre of their land or an acre. And one agreed, and he and his kids and his wife turned it into a garden. They got donations for seeds, they started gardening, and then they would have a food stand in town. And to people who couldn't afford it, they'd give the food away, and then they'd sell it at a reasonable price and then give that money back to the food pantry. So that was their way of giving back and returning the blessing that they had received. And we're hearing more and more of that sort of thing happening, of people applying a skill that they have, like gardening, to be able to help.
Thanks. Yes, any other questions? Any other ideas?
I
Yes.
have a question. You mentioned earlier about a family who was living in a home, has a lot of their possessions, and were trying to live as simply as possible because of the shame they didn't want their neighbors to know that they had lost their financial stability. And I'm wondering, you said earlier that you talk about you were in social media and getting people's stories out, because a lot of the times people's stereotype of someone who's hungry doesn't match the reality. And so I know that this shame exists and people don't necessarily want everybody to know that they're poor. How do you balance that? Like, get their story out, but like not create a story of pity where they feel like they're because of their shame still?
The shame issue is a big problem. We hear a lot of stories of especially older people, because the 2 largest segments of the hungry population are children and seniors. And we hear a lot of stories of folks who need food, who are literally going completely without and won't go get it at the pantry because they don't want their neighbors to know that they're struggling or that they need help. So part of actually what my job is to go out and find folks who are willing to share their story. Because hearing the stories helps balance out that negativity and that shame. Because people can read about Jason, this guy I wrote about. He had a great job at Chrysler, a great job at an aviation company. After 10 years, he was laid off, and they went from this nice rural class family to having to go to the food pantry. And I do have a very difficult time getting folks to share their stories with me publicly, but once in a while I'll get someone who's willing to share, because they want other people to know you don't have to be ashamed. It doesn't mean that you haven't tried hard enough or worked hard enough. And I think there's a growing consensus, especially in today's economy, that most of us are about one crisis away from poverty. One big job loss, one big medical situation. So I think telling the stories helps fix that. When we share our stories via social media and our blog and in our annual report, trying to spread awareness that it is not the homeless guy drinking beer on the corner. That's absolutely not who we're helping here. And I think that helps erase some of that stigma. Does that answer your question?
Yes, to a degree. I guess, how do you get them to tell you the story? Like, in my experience, like, people, they don't want to tell you anything. They don't want to be made public.
Right. I'm a journalist by trade. So I was a newspaper journalist. So getting people to share their stories is something I have honed over time. And the way that we start, since we have 500 partner agencies, we reach out to the agency director, the food pantry director, or the shelter director, and I don't go out and like hound people. It's not like that. I contact the director and I say, listen, we are looking for a story to tell that will inspire others. And a lot of the folks who volunteer at the pantries are also clients. The stories I just did in the last week were people who volunteer all their time at the pantry, even while they're looking for work, because they feel like that they need to give back. And so the pantry directors help connect me with folks who are open and willing. And sometimes I do, something I do that I wouldn't do as a journalist is I write their life story and then I let them read it before I go public, you know. And, you know, not everybody wants to, but there are some folks who want to say, hey, you know, yeah, I'm calling to a food pantry, but I was just like you 2 weeks ago or a month ago, so you have something you really do want to share.
When you mentioned the need to try and influence our political leaders, legislators, and I know that particularly monastics would, you know, stay away from party politics, which can be, as we know right now in our on the national scene and local as well, can be so divisive and so polarized. But when it's a moral issue like hunger and injustice, I think maybe we do have an obligation to, and we're talking about socially engaged Buddhism here, so that means sometimes dirtying our hands in the political arena, and so I just wonder if you have any ideas or suggestions on how to best approach that?
Yeah, and I'm just learning about this. This is new for me, and I agree with you. It's like, when do we get involved, and at what point do we get involved? And so what I think has happened over the last 25, 30 years is that, from my understanding, government used to support the independent farmer. And the independent farmer who was producing many of the fresh fruits and vegetables that were keeping our nation healthy. It's gone the way now where the subsidized growers of food are those corporate farmers that are producing the grains and the ingredients that go into the processed foods like the chips and the snack foods, which are very inexpensive to buy. So now it's big business to subsidize those corporate farms. And what's happened over the years now is that that's big business. We have a couple of those in our own city that receive a lot of funds from the government to grow grains that go into processed foods. And those are the foods that are most inexpensive to buy if you're on a fixed income, and that's what leads to obesity. So there's a whole circle of education that I know Operation Food Search is into, I'm sure the food bank is into, which is educating a child on what a raspberry tastes like. We have a whole generation of youngsters that haven't had fresh fruits and vegetables in their diet. And it's no fault of their parents if they can't afford to buy those things, because if you try to go on that kind of a healthy grocery trip, those are the things that are most expensive right now to purchase. So community gardens is one thing, but also educating people to learn how to cook again. You know, I grew up learning how to cook because my grandmother and my mother taught me. We didn't go out to eat. We didn't eat fast food. And this has become a generation of let's eat quick and cheap, and it's not the most nutritionally way to eat. So I would even say that getting involved in that kind of an education process to say, here's a table full of fresh fruits and vegetables. What can we make? I always use zucchini because you can never grow just one zucchini. You're going to get baskets and baskets. So to teach a family, okay, this is what you can do with a basket of zucchini. So those are the kind of efforts that I'm talking about can end hunger, because giving people food is wonderful. We can't stop that. And even in this movie that I was citing, they say that without charities, without faith-based organizations, there would be so many more people who are hungry on a daily basis. And the government has kind of looked to the charities and the faith-based organizations to take care of this, okay, over the last 20 years. And we have. but it's now time to go back and say, but what can you do that needs to be changed? So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
I just wanted to make a comment on this, like another thing that I think St. Louis is doing incorrectly is when you have a community garden in a school, you cannot let the children eat the food that is grown from the community garden because there's a law that says that came up at a Gateway Greening conference a couple years ago. So
There's a child development center, the Southside Child Development Center, down in the Benton Park neighborhood. They've not only, and they are a Gateway Greening organization, they not only harvest the food and incorporate it into their cafeteria meals, but they also take the excess and let the parents take it home. And over a course of about 8 years, the parents were then coming and saying, wait a minute, my kid is now eating this vegetable that they would never look at before. How can I grow it? So then they started sending seedlings home with the parents to grow in container gardens. And so it's really brought the school into a different type of community. They have a cookbook that they've written.
but is this something that, are they sort of just fracturing the law a bit? Or because I was told that the schools could not serve the fresh food to the students, could not let the students take the vegetables home because all food that was served in the schools had to be at a certain level processed.
Now that might be true that there's, for public schools, there might be some sort of health guard regulation about where they get their produce from, but I can't imagine that there would be a law prohibiting them from taking it home. Unless it's, maybe, I'm not familiar with that law, but it could very well be. Could be a St. Louis Public Schools thing. I'm not sure.
What would they be doing?
They turn around and let the children.
Yes, we have a lady that who worked in the school canteen in Parkway District, and he always tell me a lot of time school don't bring the food. I say, how come if that's still eatable? How come not to give the charity just like a food bank? She say, no, they can't do so. If anyone is poisoned, they can't do so. I was so shocked because what I learned from news is that America is the #1 country producing lots of food, but there's a country that kids, million kids that went to school without breakfast. And I was so surprised about this. And that the second question, one question I would like to ask you, did you drink room temperature water? If you do, please raise your hand. Good. And I come because when I was in Los Angeles, then we have a children's summer camp. 99% of kids, they don't drink room temperature water. They don't. And then in our program that because we have the program that's vegetarian lunch meal, the kids won't eat the vegetable. I was really surprised. And so that's why every year we have a program for children that we teach them the auspicious of food. Because that we can't change their diet unless their mind change. But I learned that because when I was in Los Angeles, I went to Midnight Mission every month because we went there, help them to make food, distribute on the street. And one director that he graduated from UCLA Law School, but he ended up in street for 6 years. The reason is that he had a degree in law, but he ended up in drug trafficking. He had a house in Santa Monica. He knows what's the rule, but he breaks the law. And I asked him, because when I met him, he was director of Midnight Mission. I don't know if he's still there. And I asked, can we educate the people here, not taking drugs, not drink, then become alcoholic? He said, no, our mission is just to feed them. I was shocked. if you can clean, how come they can't? He just told me one sentence, because they don't change their mind. So actually here today, I think that it's not a question about how much we can do. I think here, especially most of you are Buddhist, how can we change people's mind? Because this year, number one resolution for 2013 is lose weight. Can you believe it? Lose weight. And we are here to talk about fighting hunger. So no matter how much food we grow for those families, we have to tell people what we have today, what we eat today, will become the causes of the future. If we eat wrong, medical bill, who pay for it? Taxpayer, you guys. And I think that charity models work. That's why in our center we focus on education. Educate people's mind. We are not here to try to convert you all into Buddhist, but we want to share with you how to understand life. And the most challenge I've encountered is that, oh, you're a Buddhist. If you see the people living in misery, living in poverty, what did you do? I have to train myself all the time. Even though I see a squatter was run over by a car, I was so scared because full of blood. And I see from TV that all the disaster. I have to educate our member. Whenever you see anything happen, please keep a prayer for them. No matter what kind of religion you have, keep a prayer for them. Then they get back on their own foot really quick. So that we probably can't donate a lot of money, just like they do this kind of charity work. But you always have some mind of compassion, loving kindness towards every sentient being. I think that's most important. And ask, please, every sentient being, turn around your mind to look at what's life. Get healthy. Not because of that you have money so you can. My teacher always said, having money is that your fortune. But using money is wisdom. If that we can help this organization, then you are using your money in the right way. That's your wisdom. If I talk too much, just let me know.
I did want to say, we do, I know that we do pull food from some schools. We get milk, leftover little milk. From some, I'm not sure if it's St. Louis Public Schools or one of the county schools, but we do pull food from, and what the food bank does, we get little milks. And we have an emphasis on bringing in fresh produce and vegetables and healthier items. But one of our missions is to educate people, especially children, to go into schools and teach them. I went into East St. Louis and did this game where I held up pictures of healthy food and unhealthy foods, and kids were all over the place on whether they got it right. I mean, we hear that in East St. Louis there's some a pantry there, and the children have never seen a zucchini in person. So, when we have something called a food fair every month. If there's a county that is underserved, according to the pounds per person in poverty index, which means we have to give out so much food per person in poverty in that county. If there's a low county, we have something called a food fair, where we take 30,000 pounds of food, drop it in a parking lot, and 200 families come through and we load their cars with food. Often that's fresh produce. Like last week, it was onions, potatoes, tomatoes, zucchini, or no, not zucchini, sweet potatoes. And we try to give them recipes, because there is, like you said, there's an issue with this generation, my generation even, not knowing how to cook, not knowing what to cook, and not understanding health consequences, because obesity and food insecurity, ironically, are linked. Because if you have $1, a Big Mac costs $1, but a pound of turkey meat and some tomatoes and some rice costs $10. So it's this issue of, okay, we're teaching you, like when I was talking to that school in East St. Louis, I couldn't say, don't eat that, because that's all their parents could bring or had in the house. If I told them not to eat it, they would starve. So it was, eat this sometimes, eat this all the time. Because in some communities, there's not even a place to buy fresh groceries. Those are considered food deserts. There's no place to buy anything that's not processed. So anyway.
I have this question. Do we know who are those manufacturers producing those foods for the little kids?
I mean, I think
Can we find out? Maybe we should educate them first.
well,
We are feeding our children.
right, and manufacturers are going to do what they want to do to sell their products and get their money. Now, granted, like in New York now, you can't sell, I think it's about a 16-ounce soda, and that was a huge issue because there's a real fine line about what government can tell businesses to do. People get real testy about that.
Because I heard the research about the children today, the little kids, my granddaughter, they know what is vegetable. Guess what they know about vegetable? Ketchup is what they think is a vegetable.
Yeah, I believe the First Lady actually considers
That's amazing
ketchup and pizza
sad.
sauce to be a vegetable.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to stretch, and say, okay, well,
Yes, my mother told me to eat some vegetable because I was volunteering in the school. Then she grabbed the ketchup. Those kids, they think of ketchup as a vegetable. Isn't that sad? So that's the reason why.
it is. It needs to be an education both in the school and in the home. And that's part of it, is that we can't really address what people are doing in their home. We can't make them teach their kids to eat their greens. But, it is an effort that is ongoing. We're trying to do everything we can think of, short of the government coming in and saying that pizza is illegal, or chips are illegal. The government already, I think this was a couple of questions ago, but addressing legislators is part of my job as well. I reach out to all the legislators and ask them to come to our events, come to our food fairs, see the line of cars of hungry people, so they can see firsthand. So when they go and vote on something like the Farm Bill, or we get stuck in sequestration, and they're going to make $3.2 million cuts to something like CSFP, which is senior boxes of food for seniors, for low-income seniors. They actually are thinking about the real people who they're affecting by making these dramatic cuts. Reaching out to legislators, we send out letters constantly saying, can you ask your legislator to vote no, because they have a big, important role too.
Yeah,
So, sorry.
that's great. No, listen, thank you. Are there any other questions?
Isn't that most public school now, they don't have their own kitchen? They sublease or subcontract
Right,
with.
they contract out. Some of them
So,
do, yeah.
and some food come in like pretty bad too, I think.
Yeah, there was just that legislation about, I'm not sure if it's considered legislation, but the big push to make school lunches healthier. And they are making that effort, and I think they are getting better than they once were with that new push. But, it's a process.
Karen, you had another question.
I want to comment on some things spoken of. It used to be that there was hundreds of small farms across America that would feed local communities, and in more current times it's shifted to huge industrial farms, using chemicals and everything. I think, and now, the government subsidizes corn and soybeans, so a large majority of what is grown here is corn and soybeans now, which is mainly made in the process.